Grandpa, Mom and Dad are taking everything from you tonight. That's what my 9-year-old granddaughter whispered on her birthday. A child shouldn't carry words like that. But she did. And in that moment, my world shifted. What would you do if your own blood plotted to erase your name, your work, your very dignity? I didn't build my life out of steel and sacrifice just to hand it over to betrayal. Not without a fight. If family, honor, and justice still mean something to you, stick with me. This story will make you question how far loyalty should go. And trust me, you'll want to hear how it ends. I'm Victor Hale, 67. I spent 4 decades in Seattle mud and rain slinging lumber, negotiating bids, and building homes for families I'd never meet. I married a girl named Claire, who could handle a ledger with one hand and a newborn with the other. We made a life out of plywood and prayers, raised one boy. Then cancer came for her 3 years ago. After we put her in the ground, the house went quiet in a way that felt permanent. The only sound that still made sense was the laughter of my granddaughter, Sophie. These days, every Saturday morning starts with a French press and habit. I read the paper I don't need, arrange tools I'll never wear out, and tell myself I'm retired enough to stop counting. But that morning, the quiet was pierced by an early call from my son. "Dad," Daniel said, voice too tight for an ordinary Saturday. "Hey, can you come to Sophie's party? Rebecca's been planning for weeks. She, wanted me to make sure you're there." Daniel doesn't do planning. He does day of panic. And Rebecca doesn't do wanting me there. She does tolerating me near the punch bowl. I let the coffee steam warm my face. "I've never missed her birthday," I said. "What's with the urgency?" "Well," he coughed, "maybe swing by early, like 1:30? We could talk through some family stuff. Future, you know, making sure everyone's taken care of." That phrase. It walked right past my ribs and sat down in the chair where dread keeps his coat. "Future," I repeated. "All right. 1:30. After we hung up, I looked at Claire's photo on the mantel. One from the year the Sonics left town, her hair wrapped up in a bandana, laughing as if storms were just weather you worked around. Toward the end, her voice got thin, but never lost edge. "Watch Daniel carefully. Weak men let the wrong voice steer the wheel." I don't like the word weak for a man who's fallen and tried to stand. But I know this. Rebecca can whisper like a snake. I bought Sophie the teal bike she circled, a Lego set complicated enough to need a diploma, and for Rebecca, a bouquet of white roses, the diplomatic tax you pay to keep Sunday dinners civil. The cashier said, "Big celebration." I said, "Bigger than it looks." Their house was a postcard that afternoon, streamers strung with military precision, a coordinated palette of blush and gold, and a dessert table that needed its own Instagram. Rebecca opened the door with a smile you could balance china on. "Victor, you look amazing," she sang, brushing a non-existent wrinkle off my sleeve. "Can I take your coat? Drink? You must try the smoked salmon bites. Daniel made them." Daniel, who once burned water, now a chef, he materialized, clapping my shoulder like it owed him money. "Dad, there he is, my rock. Guys, this is the man who taught me everything about loyalty." He'd never put those words in that order before. I knew a set when I saw one. That living room was a stage. The neighbors played chorus, co-workers played audience, and Rebecca directed from the wings. Sophie, birthday crown tilted sideways, did her best impression of a normal 9-year-old, but her eyes kept tugging at me through the crowd like a magnet. I gave her the teal bike in the garage. She squealed, hugged me so hard my ribs remembered being young. And then, when the cake was cut and cameras were busy, she tugged my sleeve and pulled me to the hallway where the family photos lived. "Grandpa." It came out like she'd practiced it. "I heard them last night. They said you have too much money for an old man. They said tonight they'll fix it. They have papers." "Papers!" The house slanted. For a moment, my hand found the wall the way it used to find a stud behind drywall. I crouched so our eyes were level and made my voice a steady dock in a storm. "You did the right thing telling me," I said. "You are brave. Go be a kid for me. I've got the rest." She nodded so hard her crown slipped. I put it back, where it belonged. When I re-entered the living room, the band played on. Laughter pitched a notch too high, gestures a hair too rehearsed. I smiled on cue, took the plate offered, and catalogued everything. The triangulated glances between Daniel and Rebecca. The way talk of retirement made Rebecca steer us toward house maintenance, and those stares getting dangerous. The neighbor telling me he'd seen my son and daughter-in-law at First National earlier in the week, carrying a folder thick enough to choke a fax machine. I stayed long enough to watch Sophie make a wish, and long enough to plant one too, that Claire was watching me keep my promise. When Daniel suggested I stick around after folks head out, I gave him a gentle hand on the shoulder, a wince, and a line he could believe. "Headache, son. Let's do it tomorrow. 10 a.m. at my place?" Relief fought frustration on his face. Relief won. I walked out under the paper lanterns, calm but determined. Some moments in life don't give you a way back, and this was one of them. At home, I took Claire down from above the safe. The portrait swung open with the same soft sigh it had made for 20 years. Numbers turned beneath my fingers like tumblers in my own chest. I laid out receipts: tuition, mortgage, car, medical. 247 payments in 3 years. $83,600 gone. My pen made the math official. Then I made calls. Catherine picked up on the second ring. "If it's got a signature line," she said, "I'll be there 15 minutes early." Charles texted right back, "Hate conservatorship abuse. See you at 10. I poured the coffee I didn't need and slept the sleep you get at the top of a hill you're about to roll a boulder down. Morning in Seattle has a way of testing your convictions. The mist sits on the glass like regret. I showered, shaved close, put on the old navy blazer Claire liked because it made my eyes look less tired, and set the house the way you set a stage when you want the truth to echo. I laid out 3 pens, good ones with weight. I set 2 chairs across from my desk, at an angle no one thinks about, until they're seated side by side and can't quite look each other in the eye. I opened the windows for fresh air and set coffee on the table, even though Daniel never drinks it. Before 10, Catherine arrived in a gray coat that looked like it did math. She placed her notary journal on the side table like a judge setting down a gavel. "Family?" she asked, gentle but surgical. "Family," I said, and something uglier pretending to be it. At 10 on the dot, Charles knocked, carrying the kind of leather portfolio that belongs in boardrooms. He gave the room a quick sweep the way men do when they're cataloging exits. I didn't have to wait long for the main act. The doorbell rang, and there they were. Daniel in a shirt, with all the top buttons done for the first time in a year, Rebecca in a cream blouse that said power meeting, but the earrings said charm. She clocked Catherine's seal and Charles's portfolio like a debater clocking a judge's tells. Then she smiled warmly, pivoted flawlessly. "Victor, you didn't have to go to all this trouble, but it does make things efficient." Efficient. There's a word that belongs on invoices, not in living rooms. We sat. Rebecca unsnapped a leather folder, and slid out crisp stacks the way dealers slide aces when they think the table's dull. "These are durable powers of attorney," she said, smooth. "Financial and medical. We're not trying to take anything. We're trying to help you manage. So bills get paid on time, medical decisions aren't a burden. The house is handled." "Stairs," Daniel added, eager. "We've been worried about those stairs." "I appreciate the concern," I said, letting my hand hover at my temple just long enough to sell a shadow. "It's all a little overwhelming at my age." "Exactly," Rebecca cooed, tapping the signature tab. "You'll feel so relieved. It's just routine." I let the quiet stretch, long enough for them to trip over their own words. Daniel shifted. Rebecca didn't. Charles cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "she never took my last name, but folks assume, out of curiosity, when you came into the bank on Tuesday, is this what you were preparing?" Her eyes flicked to him, polite surprise. "We asked general questions. Options for elder care. We're planners." "And conservatorship," he said mildly. "You asked about expedited hearings, about how mental competency evaluations are scheduled. You asked who initiates when a family member is uncooperative. My branch manager was concerned. That's why I took the call." A tiny pulse in Rebecca's jaw betrayed the first crack. Daniel looked like a man who'd sat down on a chair that wasn't there. Catherine didn't look up from her journal, but her pen paused mid-line. "Just so I'm clear," she said to no one and everyone, "you're here to notarize Victor's signature on documents that would immediately transfer decision-making authority to you?" "Temporarily," Rebecca said. "We'd only use it if necessary." I opened my top drawer and set my stack on the desk. Copies of every transfer, every short-term loan, every cashier's check that had "for Sophie" written in the memo line with a hand that knew it wasn't. I'd highlighted dates, totals, and the gentle slope of manipulation until it looked like a graph from a business seminar called "How to Boil a Frog." "That's 83 grand," I said conversationally. "A man can build a starter home on that if he still remembers how to swing a hammer." Daniel swallowed. "Dad," I raised my hand. "I'm not finished." I turned a page. "And last night, your daughter, my granddaughter, whispered something into my ear that changed everything I was about to forget. I let that sit. Sophie heard you. Both of you. She heard you decide I have too much money for an old man. She heard you say you would fix it tonight. She is 9. The room did that thing rooms do right before storms and verdicts. The air went thin. Rebecca recovered first. "Children, Miss Here. You know how they are. We were worried about you. You left the stove on last week." "The kettle," I said. "On purpose. For tea." I poured it into a mug that says, "One Grandpa." Catherine quietly closed her journal, hands folded. I could feel her aligning with the part of the room where the floor was still moral. I leaned back and let my voice settle into the timbre it took me 40 years to learn. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put those down. You're going to listen. And you're going to understand why I'm still the only adult in this room." Daniel's eyes glistened. There was my boy. Underneath the bravado and the debt and the fear of being small, there was a kid with skinned knees who used to sit shotgun and sing off-key with his mom to Springsteen. "Dad," he said, voice breaking. "We didn't—" Rebecca said. Rebecca's head snapped toward him, eyes warning him back into alignment. That was when I knew the order of betrayal was not a straight line. It was a loop with one person pulling it tight. I didn't slam my hand on the desk. I didn't raise my voice. I did the thing that scares people more than yelling. I got very, very steady. "You tried to take my name off my life," I said. You tried to sign me out of my own story. I slid the powers of attorney back across the desk. No, when you build, you learn the sound of failure. The pop when a nail splits dry wood. The subtle shift of weight before a scaffold gives. That room had the sound of something giving. Charles, banker to the marrow, cleared his throat again, but there was a different quality to it now. "Victor," he said, "do you want me to review alternative structures? A living trust, for instance, protective measures that maintain your autonomy?" "Stay," I said. "Bear witness." Catherine set her seal to the side with deliberate care. "For the record," she said, "I will not notarize anything that appears coerced, and I will document today's events should a court inquire." Rebecca's jaw flexed. "This is absurd. We planned a simple, legal way to help a man who is clearly struggling." "Stop," I said. "The only struggle I have is this: reconciling the boy I raised with the man who stood beside you at a bank, asking how to rush me into incompetence." Daniel let his hands dangle between his knees. "Dad, I got scared," he said. "The mortgage, Sophie's school, the job." "I know what fear feels like," I said. "It feels like a winter you can't afford the heat for. But when I was afraid, I got another job. I didn't write my father out of his life." Rebecca leaned forward. "You're emotional," she said. "This is why we need to take this off your shoulders. It's too much." She slid the medical POA closer, voice soft as felt. "You forget things. You missed your cardiology appointment." "I rescheduled it," I said, "to the morning after her school play because priorities are not a symptom." I smiled, small and sharp. "Also, the cardiology report says my heart is fine, which is more than I can say about this one." Her eyes flashed. "You think you're clever, Victor, but courts don't like chaos. They like order. They like paperwork. We have paperwork." So did I. I opened another folder and placed it gently on the desk. A letter on letterhead from my primary physician, dated last week, confirming cognitive health. An email printout from an attorney I'd retained after Dorothy, my neighbor with a sixth sense for trouble, mentioned that bank visit. And at the top, in Claire's hand from years ago, a note she'd tucked into a recipe book I found last month while making a mess of her lemon bars. "If grief ever makes you doubt yourself, reread this. You are the strongest man I know. Don't let anyone rewrite you." I slid that last one across, too. Not for legal effect. For the human one. Daniel touched the paper like it might burn him. I saw the boy again, right there. "Dad," he whispered, "I'm sorry." There it was, the first honest sentence in that room since hello. Rebecca stood abruptly. "We're done." She gathered the papers with quick, angry motions. "We tried to help. You people love drama." She looked at Daniel, sharper now. "Let's go." "Sit," I said, not loud, not harsh. Command voice. The one that got men to move steel in the rain. He sat. "Before you leave," I continued, "you're going to hear the rest. Because actions have consequences, and silence does too." I drew a breath and pictured Claire by the kitchen window, wrists dusted with flour, eyebrows raised in that way that meant I'd better not try to get away with half-truths. "I built a living trust," I said, "and I did it the right way. Charles has reviewed it. Catherine will witness today. Every asset with my name on it is now owned by the trust, which is managed by me. On my death, it does not pass to you, Daniel. It passes to a granddaughter who tells the truth when truth is heavy." Rebecca laughed once, a sharp sound. "You can't disinherit your own son." "You're right," I said. "I can condition him." I laid out the terms like blueprints. A 12-month probationary year for Daniel with measurable benchmarks, steady employment verified by pay stubs, no new consumer debt, 1 financial literacy class completed, and proof of attendance at Sophie's school conferences. Community service, together, father and daughter, 2 Saturdays a month at the animal shelter, because Sophie falls in love with anything that barks. Proof of counseling sessions, because money isn't the only thing that needs repair. If, I said, you meet every mark, if Catherine and Charles, 2 people with no stake in our family drama, sign off on your progress at the end of the year, then I will draft an amendment. You will not inherit cash. You will inherit stewardship, a role on the Trust Advisory Board, alongside Sophie when she is of age. Rebecca's face went still in a way that looked like winter. And what about me? You're an adult, I said. Be one. Daniel stared at the terms like men stare at scaffolding they don't trust yet, but know they have to climb. Dad, I can try. Don't say try, I said, softening because love doesn't win by humiliation. Say do. Catherine slid the trust documents to me, her eyes kind. Sign here, Victor, and here. I signed the way you sign when you know your hand is making lines your heart believes in. Charles added his tidy witness signature, the ink drying as if it understood the stakes. Rebecca stood again, gathering dignity around her like a coat that didn't quite fit anymore. Come on, Daniel. He didn't move. I need a minute, he said. She left without slamming the door. I don't know if that makes her kind or just practiced. When the house was quiet again, Daniel looked up at me, and the years collapsed into one long tightrope we'd both been walking with different forms of balance. Dad, he said, how do I start? Start by picking up your daughter from school, I said. Get ice cream. Ask her about the animals she'll be helping on Saturday. Then go home and show your wife your budget. If she laughs, show her the door. If she cries, show her the plan. He nodded, stood, and for the first time in a long time, hugged me like a man hugs the person who built the ground he stands on. When he left, Catherine and Charles busied themselves with stamps and copies and quiet talk that sounds like competence. Before they went, Charles put a hand on my shoulder. For what it's worth, he said, I see families at their worst. This is you at your best. After the front door closed and the house exhaled, I walked to the backyard. Claire's rosebush, the one that always lagged behind the others, had thrown out a single perfect bloom. I laughed out loud, because of course it had. Sophie climbed the front steps that afternoon with her backpack bouncing, and a grin that swallowed the bad days whole. Grandpa, she said, breathless. Mom's mad, and Dad's quiet. Are we in trouble? We, I said, kneeling to meet her eyes, are the opposite of trouble. We are the solution. She tilted her head like a curious robin. What does that mean? It means, I said, that your future is locked up tighter than the cookie jar your dad used to raid. There's a fund with your name on it now. You can go to any college you want. If you want to be a vet, we'll pay for vet school. If you want to study engineering, we'll buy the hard hat and pretend the campus tour is a job site. If you want to write books, we'll build you a desk that makes you feel like a giant. Her mouth made a little O of wonder. Even if Mom and Dad don't like it? Especially then, I said. You'll have choices. And choices are the opposite of being stuck. We sat at the kitchen table where Claire taught Daniel to do fractions with cutting boards and apples. I opened the laptop and pulled up photos of campuses bathed in spring. Sophie pointed at dogs in lab coats, mascots, but I let the dream stretch, and asked the questions 9-year-olds ask when they're allowed to believe they belong anywhere. Do vets fix owls? She asked. The good ones do, I said, and I told her about the time Claire and I helped a barred owl caught in construction netting out in Issaquah. We called a rescue, waited 2 hours in the drizzle, and Claire named the owl Franklin because every creature deserves a name you'd be proud to say out loud. Sophie looked out the window at Claire's roses. "Grandma would like the trust," she said in that serious tone children use when they're about to break your heart with grace. "She would," I said. "She made me promise." We spent an hour marking up a list we called Someday Soon. It included volunteer at the shelter, visit the zoo behind the scenes, watch a surgery on a TV show, and then talk through what made us squeamish, ask Dad hard questions about money and kindness, teach Mom how to make Claire's lemon bars, fail once on purpose to learn it's not fatal. By the time Daniel knocked, Sophie had chocolate on her chin and a plan on the fridge that looked more like a blueprint than a wish list. "Hey, kiddo," he said, voice soft. "You ready for a ride?" "Can Grandpa come?" she asked. "Not today," he said gently. "Today I have to show you something called a budget." She wrinkled her nose. "Does it have pictures?" "It will by the time we're done," he promised, surprising us both. When the door closed behind them, I let the quiet return. It was a different quiet. Not grief, not vigilance. Something like the hush after a verdict, when justice has been spoken out loud. In the days that followed, there were ripples. There always are. Rebecca texted me a screenshot of a real estate listing. Staging interviews Tuesday. She claimed she was working now, but the same day, Catherine called to warn me. Someone had tried to access my bank account online using security questions only family would know. Rebecca wasn't giving up easily. She had a backup plan. And that meant I had to stay 2 steps ahead. Always. Not every effort deserves applause. Some deserve caution. Daniel dropped by between sales shifts with a stack of community college brochures, financial literacy, small business accounting, carpentry night classes, because some boys grow into the men they were supposed to be by holding a tool in their hand. On the 3rd Saturday, I stood in a cinderblock room that smelled like bleach and hope, watching Sophie and Daniel walk dogs that looked like they were built out of leftover parts. Sophie crouched, offered a palm, and a mutt with 2 big ears decided to trust her. That right there was the miracle I wanted most. A child learning that love is a verb you do with your hands. As Sophie laughed with the dog in her arms, Daniel glanced back at me across the shelter floor. For the first time in years, there was no defense in his eyes, just a son, stripped bare of excuses. He gave me a small nod, the kind men use when words are too heavy. A promise, without sound. And in that moment, I knew redemption wasn't a dream. It had already begun. A week later, Catherine dropped by with final copies and that satisfied look professionals wear when paperwork has been turned into protection. "I put a certified copy with your attorney," she said, "and I made a note in my journal about the attempted coercion. If anyone tries to resurrect that plan, the record will not be kind." Charles called to say he'd flagged my accounts with additional verification protocols. "No one moves a dime without your say-so," he said. "Or mine, if you're too busy rescuing owls." That night, I pulled down Claire's lemon bar recipe and made a passable mess. The crust was wrong. The sugar was high. But the house smelled like citrus and memory, and some failures are just love wearing a different shirt. I don't know what a year will do to a family. I don't know if Daniel will meet every mark, or if Rebecca will discover that being needed and being trusted are different currencies. I don't know if Sophie will stick with owls, or move on to engines, or write a book that makes me underline every other sentence. Here's what I do know. Love is not acquiescence. Love is not signing yourself away to keep peace. Love is telling the truth, especially when truth tastes like a mouthful of pennies. Love is a trust fund that tells a little girl, "You are free to become." And love is telling a man you raised, "I will not cushion you from consequences, but I will hand you a ladder." If you're a father listening to this, or a son, or someone standing in a kitchen with roses blooming beyond the glass and a stack of papers on the table, hear me. Money is not your legacy. The way you protect what is right is. The way you apologize is. The way you fix is. I still talk to Claire when the house goes quiet. I tell her Sophie is safe now, and sometimes I swear I see her smile flicker back at me in the glass. That's how I know. We're going to be okay. But here's the truth I want you to take with you. Life is not measured by what we give away too easily, but by what we protect with honor. Love is not silence. It is the courage to speak when silence would be easier. And justice isn't handed down in courts alone. Sometimes it's carved at a kitchen table, by a man refusing to surrender what's right. If you've ever carried the weight of betrayal, or fought to protect the people you love, then you know this story isn't just mine. It's ours. These moments test what we're made of, and they decide what legacy we leave behind. So hold fast to dignity. Stand guard over your name. Teach the next generation that family isn't about taking, it's about protecting, sacrificing, and keeping promises even when it hurts. If this story stayed with you, don't stop here. There are more. Fathers, mothers, sons, daughters. Stories that prove honor still matters, and justice always finds its way. Stick around, because every family has secrets. Some are sitting right across your dinner table, and sometimes the scariest secrets are the ones we never dare to say out loud.